Islam, Moorish kin. Yes, sir. We right back at it again. We don't get tired over here. Ain't no sleep. Islam, Brother Michael Morbay, Shimo Temple, Moorish kin. Yeah, we got a measure we going to bring on the manifest. You know, we're going to try to make it a little briefly, but most definitely in depth to a certain degree. In depth and adept. And this special measure here is actually dealing with or we can say an adept exegesis of the divine constitution and bylaws that was brought by a holy prophet. You know, and everything about this special document, you know, is most definitely is designed in a divine way, so to speak. You see? Islam, Brother Myers Bay. Peace and love. So we just getting ready to give our people some insight in regards to dealing with the law. So first and foremost, you know, as we always do, want to rise giving praises to the great God, Allah, honors to his holy prophet, honors to our holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, Elhaj Sharif Abdul Ali, that is. We give honors to our Moorish kin once again, here, there, and everywhere, and therefore honors to all of you who are honoring yourselves by being yourselves. We give honors to our Grand National Seal, Grand National Emblem, National Flag, Divine Constitution and Bylaws, and honors to all of you who are a living manifestation and personification of everything that our holy prophet brought to make us a nation. Starting with this special measure when we deal with our divine constitution and bylaws, and you know, we often basically open up by saying salvation, our God, in unity. You know, and sometimes when you hear people make these statements, they just loosely use this, you know, wording, so to speak, along the lines of wordplay. But we know freedom, as I always state, is not a game. So we're not here to play with our people. Islam, Brother Parta Bay, we give honors to you. We're not here to play games with our people. We're here to teach our people, right? So those Moors who know that basically when you're dealing with the law, you're dealing with everything that has to do with yourself. You know, the law is what governs you. You know, as you hear me speak about, you know, the Moorish compass, you know, this is a symbol, you know, that represents a grand aspect of the spirit, you know, but when you deal with that Moorish square, you know, you're dealing with a grand aspect of the law, you know, and we actually know that this is how we are able to build ourselves to be temples of perfected men and women. This is how we are made, or we are brought forth. But guess what? You know, your nationality and your divine creed, as we talked about earlier, derives, you know, through two pathways. By one, from the great God through your mother and your father. Your mother is often your first teacher, your first enlightener when you come into existence. And dealing with it from that special aspect, we can say it like this. You know, if she is the one that educates you along the line of putting that love in you, you know, that gives you the ability to exercise your divinity, then this is where your spirit, you know, gains a basis or a foundation to be receptive to those things that are beyond just the natural environment, so to speak. Whereas when your father, he sets law in you, the law is to bring a discipline to you. That is if, you have a mother and a father that has been, we'll say, brought into the knowledge of themselves, and even outside of that, even if they haven't, through the grace and the will of the Creator, you can still be brought into the consciousness of yourself by means of your divine mother and father, whom we refer to as Ish and Isha. You see, they will build you to become that temple of perfected man. They will be the instruments that will be utilized, in other words, in your building or your perfection. So salvation, in our constitution, we often look at salvation as being our holy prophet. And we look at our God as none other than the great God, the universal God, Allah. And then we look at unity. Unity in and of itself actually represents us as a collective. Our holy prophet told us that he founded, his lawfully chartered organization for the purpose of teaching our people to be better citizens. In other words, they would learn to become citizens in the state that he had found them, being properly educated, taught who they are, taught what it means to be one with the Creator through deific will. And then after they have been, we can say, prepared, after the soil of their hearts and mind has been properly prepared, then one can come forth and plant those seeds which would unfold in due time, into the fullness of the perfection. And this is still the prophet working from the plane of soul, because Noble Drew Ali is not dead, contrary to popular belief, right? So he has those who are working in his garden, so to speak. So nevertheless, once the seeds, are planted and then they begin to unfold, planted by the ministers that are on the manifest, this is where the uniting process comes into play at. Because again, he founded his lawfully chartered organization for the purpose of teaching our people to be better citizens. In other words, he taught them how to be citizens under the government that they were, so that in due time, when they unfold, they will become citizens that are perfected in their own nation. And that's why he said that he established, or founded, so to speak, his Moorish divine and national movement, for the purpose of the uniting of the Asiatic states. So this is the unity. When you speak of salvation, our God unity, the prophet, the great God, and the people. You often hear, Morocco, when they speak of their foundation, they talk about God, the country and all this type of demonstration, and you're dealing with your kings and all this type of stuff right here, right? Where our, divine ruler, supreme grand ruler is none other than our holy prophet. You see? And we already know we're dealing with the great God. What is our country? You see, some people not having the knowledge of my country is America. My country is the sweet land of liberty of this. They'll go in that especially area if they don't know better. So your country is being your country because you're indigenous to the land. And all of this has a grand, we'll say a grand necessity that must be embraced, so to speak, meaning knowing the need or the must that our prophets speak of in the Constitution, that we embrace this intelligence or this state of mind at once. So nevertheless, knowing that salvation is the prophet, Allah is our God, and unity represent the uniting of the Asiatic states, or us as a collective, or what we like to call the Moorish divine and national movement. Now we can go into the divine constitution of Moorish America. And it's a reason why it's called a divine constitution, because you are dealing with theocracy. You're not dealing with a democracy. You're not dealing with a republic, nor are you dealing with the types of politics that are demonstrated in a democracy or a republic. Theocracy is simply rule under God. Now, it's one thing to be governed by a law, but another thing to abide by the law in which you are governed by. So as we begin to go into this measure, you will see, what it truly means, when we speak of our divine constitution of Moorish America. What do we mean when we say divine? Again, it started from the source, the root, the causeless cause. You see? This is coming from the Creator. It ain't man telling you to do this or he gonna take you off the counter. I kill you if you don't do what I say do. It ain't that type of measure where you got to be forced at the point of a sword. This is natural to you. This is your natural state of being, or as they like to call it in the Arabia, your fitra. You see? This is the state in which you were created. This is the essence of your being. You see? It's already in you. It has to be drawn out of you. It has to be extracted from that hard shell, that has, we can say we obtained along the way as a result of slavery, suffering, oppression, and everything else that contributed to that. So nevertheless, Constitution, many of us don't know that we are a constituted being. The basis or the structure of our being is based upon the divine constitution. And the divine constitution in its most, we'll say in its most fundamental form represents the 5 principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Love, if you can just demonstrate that alone, then the love, in itself will basically place you in line or align you in your ways, acts, and deeds with the law. Right? So the Constitution is within you. The Constitution governs you because in all actuality, this is the spirit that is guiding you. You see? And the law in regards to dealing with this has to do with your conduct being guided accordingly through your own deific will. See, this is how you learn to use that which represents your mother and your father, that your days may be long upon the land. Right? Okay. And again, when we deal with Moorish America, that's a whole nother ball game. We ain't talking about, somebody else's occupied America. We're talking about Moorish America. And Moorish Americans are free-thinking people. Moorish American are people that are, we can say, divinely appointed and anointed to be who they are. Because as I state all the time, we're the return of the ancient ones. Unless you believe that you something else. And when you get to talking about, a lot of people like to try to tie the Moors back to Morocco, and we already know that the Moabites are the founders of Morocco. You see? So we trace ourselves back to the ancient Moabites. The gods and goddesses that ruled the land, the executive rulers, right? So nevertheless, we want to go into Act 1. Act 1 is a grand measure, and we talked about the constitution of self. We can even go into the alignment of the centers of our body, this apparatus. A lot of people like to refer to them, as centers of unfoldment or, chakra points or whatever the case may be. If we started with Act 1, where we are told the Grand Sheikh and the Chairman of Moorish America are empowered to make law and enforce laws with the assistance of the Prophet and the Grand Body of Moorish America. The assistant Grand Sheikh is to assist the Grand Sheikh in all affairs if he lives according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And it is known before the citizens of Moorish America. we get into that special aspect, we know that, yeah, we have a grand sheik that governs a body on the manifest, but we also have a grand sheik in a conscious state of mind that's governing this body of manifest as we move, on a daily basis. That is if we are willing to take heed to the divine theocracy and the constitution of your being, and take heed to the voice of the great God within, and this is how you are better able to relate, to your manifest sheik, because you already got the lesson from the sheik within. So if you are able to listen to the manifest, and then get a drawing, it is as a result of you receiving an instruction from on high. It's your nature. Matter of fact, what's said, by your sheik on the manifest appeals, to that intellect or that spiritual essence. And what is said by the spiritual essence or the intellect appeals, through your actions and your obedience, to your leadership. You see? Had this been demonstrated over 100 some odd years ago, we wouldn't be in the condition that we in right now, would we? But we ain't gonna go there. So when you deal with this sheik, there's also a chairman within yourself, within your consciousness. You see? And we know that, the chairman is working hand in hand with the sheik within and on the manifest in order to help make you one that is a better citizen, so to speak, one that is able to make law and enforce law that aids you and assists you along the way to this effect that it shapes your consciousness of you being reminded of the God that you are, being reminded of the God that made you. Who made you? Allah. You see? So not only is the Grand Sheik and the chairman, within you having power to make law, enforce law, it also have to do with, the prophet. And this is first foremost, with the assistance of the prophet. Because that Grand Sheik in you, that chairman in you, can't do nothing without the prophet being at the root of your consciousness. You see? And this is why in the Moorish American government, we say Allah, Ali in you. Allah, Ali in me. You see? That's the grand measure. That's that triune measure. So we call this Act 1. This is how you forge your scimitar, at the base, of your being. You forge your scimitar of consciousness, and you are able to strive and ascend upward and unfold. You see? So you unfold, coming out of that special base nature, but it takes a mastermind to guide you. It takes a grand man to guide you. It takes those that are elevated to bring you into the highest plane of wisdom. And we call this being in tune with the Most High. Hence the name Ali. Dealing with our holy prophet, we say it all the time. And we're going to use that hammer of repetition. But sometimes you just have to keep making it plain. You see? Especially when you're dealing with finite men, and those who like to do finite things. So, again, now, they are making law with the assistance of the prophet, that Grand Sheik in you, that chairman, with they making laws, right? Forcing laws. Because have you ever heard somebody say, one of the main idioms you hear in the Islamic world, you must learn to govern yourself before you can govern others. And the key in regards to dealing with that aspect is even going back to your 12-step ladder. You can't climb it if you ain't dealing with obedience first and foremost. Obey, not because master said so. Obey because it's your nature. Obey. Govern yourself, O governor. You grand governor, you of yourself. Have you learned to govern your passions? Have you learned to govern your desires? Have you learned to govern that hatred, that will to slander, demonstrate lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that would harm you and your people? O governor, obey. Obedience is better than sacrifice, right? But let us keep going. So not only do you have the assistance of the prophet, but you also have the assistance of the grand body of Moorish America. You know what that means? That means that your Moorish kin is on the manifest, to aid and assist you, making that law become a part and parcel of yourself, aid and assisting you that you never forget. You're always keeping remembrance, the law, the fact that you are a Moorish American Muslim. That's if you got love in you and you care. You don't want to let your grand body down. You don't want to let your nation down. You don't want to let your people down. Yeah, we know that we have exalted councils. We have an exalted grand body, but we always remind our people that the collective, in regards to dealing with the grand body, is really the vessel that allow you to know that the prophet is on the manifest. But the people have to reflect that. That's another measure, right? So, and we know along with that, the assistant grand sheik assists the grand sheik. So there's a reinforcement process that goes on. Not only do you have, a grand sheik, but you have an assistant grand sheik. Not only do you have, one that is the will of the great God Allah, but you have one that will aid in enforcing that will, remaining what it is, remaining you to be fixed in the law. You see? So you can't help but come out great. You can't help but manifest, as a lawful human being, so to speak, right? Or we can say a God man in the flesh, or for our sisters, a God woman in the flesh, right? So as we go a little further, we are told that if he lives according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and it is known before the citizens of Moorish America. So that means, if you got a sheep mind within you, then naturally you are conforming to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. If not, your own thoughts will betray you. Your own way of thinking will cause you to run into some punishment for your transgression. And this ain't got nothing to do with nobody outside of you doing it. It's somebody that's inside of you doing it. Trying to overthrow something, right? Oh, the Constitution within you. Trying to overthrow Act 1, right? You didn't know that the triune of law was at the essence of your being? How do you think that you was able to forge that scimitar of consciousness from the altar fires of love? That's another measure. So now that we understand Act 1, now we can go a little further. We can also go into the rest of the bylaws. Dealing with Act 2, for example, we are told that all meetings are to be open and closed promptly. According to the Circle 7 in love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, Friday is our holy day of rest, because on a Friday, man was formed in flesh, and on a Friday, man departed out of flesh and ascended unto his Father God Allah. For that cause, Friday is the holy day for all Muslims all over the world. Now, we thought that this just had something to do with opening up a meeting. But what about opening up your mind? to meet with another mastermind among your people. And when we talk about opening meetings promptly, well, we as a people need to make a speedy reparation when it comes to dealing with meeting right now in this era and time. Promptly. No time for play. We see what's going on around us, right? Is your mind open in order to clasp the mind, because the hand is symbolic to the mind? Is your mind open to clasp the mind of your brother's mind, your sister's mind? That there may come, some, we can say some solutions to the problem, so to speak. If your mind is closed, then you can't open up for the meeting. I just put it that way right there. The door to your heart, your consciousness, all that right there sealed up. But then a seventh angel come and he broke the seal. But we'll get to that later, right? So, dealing with this, not only do you have it open, but then you have love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. You open your mind according to the realms of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Matter of fact, anything in retrospect or opposition to that right there, you burn up from the start. So when you approach your Moorish kin along the lines of the meeting of the mind, if you are living according to your divine constitution, then you open to love. You open to receive truth and give truth. You open to receive peace and give peace. You open to receive freedom, and give freedom. You're open, to receive justice and give justice, administer justice to your people. You see? And so that brings us to Friday, being a holy day of rest. Now, oftentimes we think, that, okay, this right here means it's just our Sabbath. Well, we don't work on this. This is day of worship. And that's all good when you're dealing with the manifest. But what about when it deals with the self? Friday, we are told, is the day in which man was formed in flesh and the day in which man departed out of flesh. And for this cause, this is why Friday is the holy day for all Muslims over the world. So this tells you that Friday then represents perfection. It represents a cycle. And now you might say, well, Brother Shahid, how is that possible? How does Friday represent a cycle? Well, when you start with week, along the line of the days of the week, then you have Saturday, you have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You see? That's just dealing with the manifest. But guess what? You come back through the same cycle again. So it's not the aspect of dealing with a manifest day, so to speak, but it has to do with every day that you live your life should be a day of unfoldment, a day of cyclic regeneration, renewal. You see? You should be born, basically Friday should be every day to you. This is why it's a hallowed day. It's not just a day of the week where you demonstrate, like a lot of our Moorish kin like to say, that Superman degree, where you come out the booth and you go back in the booth type of measure. That's a whole nother measure. No, you demonstrating love all the time. You always ascending. So every day is Friday to you. It's a day of perfection. The seventh day. Huh? Now that would be synonymous coming up from the base chakra, that scimitar chakra, or scimitar sacrum that we was referring to earlier. They like to call that's where the Kundalini is formed. Act 1, that's it, right? But then you come up utilizing that scimitar in the fence, having a knowledge of self, because scimitar is consciousness, and your unfoldment of consciousness, that area that we call the regenerative area, has nothing to do with you being created on Friday, because you were made by the great God during that time, right? So you learn that your Friday actually represents a rebirth. It represents a process of unfoldment through which you can be, as a lot of people call it, reborn. This is a time of re-entry. You see? So that's another aspect when you're dealing with Act 2. Now, what about Act 3? You are continuing to ascend, right? How does this have to do with the Constitution that represents you as a constitutional character? Well, Act 3 states love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice must be proclaimed and practiced by all citizens of Moorish America. No citizen is to put in danger or accuse falsely his brother or sister on any occasion at all that may harm his brother or sister, because Allah is love. Now, this is very key, because we got a lot of our people out there that like to accuse their brothers and their sisters falsely. You know, even after one has pleaded their case and showed them the evidence and everything else, you know, that's that NBC nature in us. That's that demarcated thought pattern, that Ethiopian thought pattern within us that calls us to demonstrate like that. So love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice must be proclaimed and practiced. That means that you don't just say you love your brother. You don't say, you know, that you are speaking along the lines of truth and peace, freedom, and justice. You are, again, being these things, right? And I'm going to say something about this as well, because when you deal with those first 3 acts, I like to call them the triune acts, because they are the only acts that have love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice back to back in a sequence in them. So those are the triune acts, Acts 1, 2, and 3. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. It's being hammered in with the hammer of repetition. You are being reminded. That means your principles are the most important thing that makes up your these are the ingredients of your constitutional character. That's why we say the 5-pointed open green star, symbolic to life, symbolic to renewal, rebirth, symbolic to divinity, being as green and fertile as it is. This represents the fertility of your consciousness, the soil of the soul unfolding through consciousness. Right? So, now that we're dealing with the triune acts, you know that this is pretty much planting the flag within the soil of your soul. This is raising the flag. When you talk about proclaiming and practicing, we ain't talking about just flying a banner, putting it up on your wall or putting it on a pole and let it blow in the wind. We are actually talking about going within the self, becoming that flag, because the first flag in all actuality was a man living the standards of the principle. In ancient Kemet, it was harmony, truth, balance, right, order, and justice. The divine constitution, in a nutshell, summarized, right? So, going further into this special measure, when you talk about the proclaiming and the practice by all citizens of Moorish America, now we can look at those that are on the manifest as citizens. But if you're looking at the body along the line of the Constitution, then you have to look at those thoughts. You see, those thoughts, have you made your thoughts that of one who is able to demonstrate citizenship, pardon self. And when you're dealing with the citizenship, Instead of trying to make somebody else outside you obey you, how about allowing your thoughts to obey the high dictates of yourself and not letting them run rampant? I see this right here, so I'm going to take that right there if I want it. I don't like him, so I'm going to go hard at him. Man, we can go into many different aspects of it. But that's a whole nother level. And so when you control your thoughts, when you utilize that compass to keep your passions and your desires within the bounds of righteousness, you see, when you utilize the spirit to drive you as opposed to your passions, when you have that law in your compass on the manifest, keeping that conduct square, when that is demonstrated, you can demonstrate the possibilities of yourself, the possibilities of being a perfect man, perfect woman, perfect child of the great God Allah, right? So, again, you wouldn't accuse falsely. You wouldn't make a statement, that you couldn't back with some form of law. Now, it's up to the people to accept that after you put it out there. You see, because many of us like to move on emotion. Oftentimes when we get off in these threads, a lot of people just going off of their opinion. And no matter how much information you put out there and give them, they still throwing the information out there, even though you have given them, they get throwing their opinion out there, even though you're giving them information as a comfort. You can give them a whole line of it. But if they don't have that compass, a mastery over it, know how to utilize it and use it, then, they got a bogus bill of materials anyway. So, what you are able to use to build, they try to use to destroy. You ever seen somebody try to do demolition with a compass? Oh, I swear, you ain't never seen nobody. You'd think they was crazy, wouldn't you? Prophet say he brought something that you can't tear up, it'll tear you up. That's a whole nother measure. So, as we move along, and we know that this Act 3, in all actuality, we talked about the passions and the desires. You see, we moving on up a little bit, right? We coming up this special, we can say ladder. We headed into the chambers. We are moving into the realm of executive rulers. That's where we're going, right? So when you deal with this special aspect and you go into Act 4, this is dealing with citizens. All citizens must preserve these holy and divine laws. And all citizens must obey the laws of the government, because by being a Moorish American, you're part and parcel of the government and must live the life accordingly. What do we mean when we say all citizens must preserve these holy and divine laws? It must become part and parcel of your consciousness, written in the stone, which is a solid rock of understanding in your dome. You got me? The Moabite stone. Yeah, that one. So when you get that a special drawing, Moorish kin, and you go into the essence of self now, preserving the law means you preserve it within your consciousness, you preserve it within your heart, which we always emphasize. We are not talking about the blood pumping organ. You see, we're talking about the seat of your intellect, the seat of intelligence. This is the heart that we are referring to here. So in other words, it becomes first nature to you to demonstrate according to your principles. This is how you become the acts. You become an active Moor. You see, you're an active Moor when you are moving in accord with the acts. You're an active Moor when you have become one with these acts through your deific will. Right? The line that unites the divinity of the matter is the golden cord, by which you are able to keep the door of the law open. You're strong enough to keep the door of the law open because that golden cord is spirit anyway. But if you sever the tie and you allow the door to become closed, meaning the door of your consciousness, oh, well, now, you lawless. Law has become a dead letter to you. You have become a vagabond, as they say. You have become pretty much free game. Now that lower self is able to run rampant, and all its agents, dupes, and imps, and everything else come at you. You are unprotected. You have lost your sovereignty, right? The sovereignty over yourself. We ain't talking about sovereign citizenry, squatting on somebody else's land. Talking about, I'm going to take this right here because it belongs to me. I own the land. No, we talking about dealing with the self. Are you a sovereign over yourself, over your being? Or are you a slave? Because you can't be free and a slave at the same time. I ain't seen a free slave yet. So when it comes to preservation of these laws, and knowing that, you're a Moorish American because you're part and parcel of the government and must live the life accordingly, this is knowing that you are part and partial of a nation of people. So your thoughts must be part and partial of being that of a nation of people. You see, simplicity but adept. This is what we mean by an adept exegesis of the divine constitution and bylaws. Right? Now, government. You often hear me refer to our prophet talking about taking us up in an apparatus. And you often hear me saying that this is government. You see, government meaning governing men, the governing of men. Man in itself, singular, actually has to do with the mind. So again, going back to the self, governing yourself. The government right here in you. Powerful measure if you can grasp it. We have 12 departments in our government. Well, what are they? They are synonymous with the 12 cranial expressions in the brain, so to speak. Because you need this for your motor skills and everything else. Even being able to function properly in your central nervous system. Those 12 cranial nerves are necessary. So it is with the 12 departments of your government, of the self. And these 12 departments are also synonymous with what I like to call basically the 12-step ladder. You see, this is a constellation right here in you. Your departments are synonymous with your thoughts. It's not within the flesh or the bones to have the ability to think or reason. In other words, nobody, I remember I used to love listening to 8 Ball and MJG, and they used to say the devil made me do it in one of their songs. Well, when you're a God man, or you a God woman, ain't no devil making you do nothing. You feel me? Because you're a governor of yourself. You see? So when you're able to govern yourself, again, you ain't got to worry about nobody else trying to govern you. You ain't got to worry about nobody else penitentiary. You ain't got to worry about nobody. Even when it come down to livelihood, when you're a governor of self, you know how to go out and create business for yourself. You know how to demonstrate along the lines of commerce. And if you in accord with your acts and the divinity within you, then whatever you will come on to manifest. See what I'm talking about? Very key. Very key. So all of this going back to dealing with this government itself, this being, this is an apparatus. From the heart of man to the heart of Allah, we are able to climb that 12-step ladder. You see? And I'm using this as going within, not the blood pumping organ, but within the essence. You see? All of this is key in order for you to successfully, be able to activate the mandate of divinity that has been placed at the essence of your being, Islam. Right? Do you have a mandate to this land right here? You being the man that owned the land, the earth upon which this structure stands? Huh? That's ADEPT. So, when you go a little further into this special drawing and we're moving along, now we come to Act 5. No organization of Moorish America is to cause any confusion or overthrow the laws and constitution of the said government, but to obey hereby. Now, this is a grand drawing because it's coming up here in the region right here. This is the region that govern right here, because most of the confusion come from that little red flannel. Now, it's one thing to teach and people get mad. That's something else, right? But when we talk about really causing confusion, we talk about that hatred, that slander, that lewdness, that murder. When you have those intents in your heart and mind. When you want to do harm to your Moorish kin. When you want to be slick, and you trying to slide up and womanize the queens and, a whole bunch of other foolery. When you want to be 3/4 slick, and think you can talk your way into and out of any situation. You got the gift of gab, so to speak, right? Especially if you think you got some pimping in your history. But nevertheless, in all actuality, no organization is to create or cause any confusion or overthrow, this is special law or the constitution of the said government, but abide, and obey hereby. So don't confuse your heart and mind to the extent to where you overthrow the divine, because there's most definitely hell to pay for your behind. When you're dealing with that special drawing, karma is real. Karma is real. Now, you can allow karma to become a rule of your life, but I chose to be the executive ruler of my life. And I know the Moors who have a pure heart and mind, they're thinking along the same lines. They don't have to be governed by another because they know again how to govern themselves. You see how simple that is? So having that knowledge, now we can go on up to, Act 6, which would take us right here. They like to call this the third eye. We had a class on this tonight. You're dealing with the Ajna chakra, right? The seat of the soul, the eye of Heru, the eye of Ra. In ancient Kemet, you will see them, and they had the serpent out of the crown that represented a uniting of the lower and upper Kemet, the Deshret, right? That special drawing had to do with one that was a master of the two lands. Are you a master of the two lands? Are you a master of the plane of soul and a master of the plane of things made manifest? Because spirit man was given a soul, as we said in our last broadcast, that he might function upon the plane of soul, and a body of flesh that he might function upon the plane of things made manifest. Angels govern the heavens. Muftis are able to govern the passions, the earth, material issues. Yeah, that's ADEPT. So in Acts 6, we are told with us, all citizens must proclaim their nationality. When we talked about those citizens moving along the line of thoughts, we don't want to be those who say that we are Moorish Americans, but our heart is at variance with what we speak. You speak as a Moorish American, you talk as a Moorish American, but your consciousness is far away from being a Moorish American as the sun is from the moon. So you have to make thoughts of citizenry from your consciousness. Get rid of that NBC thought pattern when you was whatever you was in the state of now. Forge your mind, your thought along the lines of the alt. Don't bring that religious gang banging up into your consciousness. Every time you hear your Moorish kin bringing something forth, instead of sitting there getting wisdom from it, you trying to find a reason to have conflict. And you wonder why it's so hard for our people to come into unity. Unite the citizenry thoughts of your mind first. And then perhaps you can do something on the plane of things made manifest. Because if your thoughts are at variance with your actions, if you're not the message that you bring, then you're going to have some problems along the way. It ain't got nothing to do with what somebody else said that you thought wasn't in line with what the prophet said or what the prophet manifested. It's all according to your own thoughts. As a matter of fact, one of the first things that a real adept learned is to control his or her thoughts. You can't even proceed in your initiation process as a neophyte if you don't learn to control that. Law governs all events. So with us, all citizens must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their nationality, because you got to, again, it takes a Moorish American to be a Moorish American. It takes a Moorish American to teach a Moorish American how to be a Moorish American. You see? So, our citizens must proclaim their nationality, and their divine creed, that they may know that they are part and parcel of this said government, right? And know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. Now, this is deep right here. One, teaching your people their nationality and divine creed, teaching them to honor their mother and their father. You see? Morocco don't honor the ancient Moabites. I ain't going to go there. We're going to keep it in line with what we're talking about. But even when you deal with the time between, 1779 and 1865, our Holy Prophet referred to that as the time of slavery. But when your thoughts are part and partial of the citizenry, of the immortal postulates and the principles that are founded upon love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, then you know that you've been free from that special era. But I'm going to tell you, ain't no slave wrote no Constitution between those 1779 and 1865. Ain't no slave made no treaties between that time either. Because you was a slave. What slave you know writing treaties? Right now, people with a slave mentality can't even come together so we can enforce law and bring our people into being a nation. So how they going to do something in the time of being subject to somebody else's assumable jurisdiction? Do that make sense to you? Let us proceed on. It said, but this is a new era in time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live in the nations of the earth. All right, new era in time now. In other words, there should be a paradigm shift up here. There should be an unfoldment. After all the times and the climbs that there came God men to manifest on the plane to teach us how to do divine things, after all these prophets that done came by now, knowing that the prophet Noble Drew Ali was the last prophet of this new era in time, well, we should be ready for unfoldment. I put it that way. So not only unfoldment, but to be recognized, as it is stating here, as the government in which you can live, recognized as a people. But that has to do with self-determination. This is all about going within yourself, determining that you would be a nation. Not because somebody else said it. That's why you hear us in the Moorish American government state, we are not going to the UN, we going through the UN. It's a big difference in going to it. Going to it means that you got intention of probably just hanging out there, and no, our work is going beyond that. We know the prophet work from the plane of soul to help organize that special demonstration. And we're not talking about the European activity. If you read the principles in the charter, you will see the prophet's principles there. He laid this foundation when he went before the Pan American Conference. And he had frog eyes with it. C.K. Bay. Right? But that's a whole nother measure. So, nevertheless, it stated this is the reason why Allah, the great God of the universe, ordained Noble Drew Ali the prophet to redeem his people from their sinful ways. What do we mean? Redeem us from our sinful ways. Redemption in law. The only way out of the fire is through the fire. The same laws that were used to enslave you are the same laws with the proper knowledge can be used to free you. But you have to be conscious of your own law in order for that to be so. Right? So then it stated Moorish Americans are descendants of the ancient Moabites whom inhabited the northwest and southwestern shores of Africa. Well, you already seen my last broadcast, so I ain't even got to go into that. You already know why we are those who are descendants of the ancient Moabites. But also it do have something to do with your thinking. Knowing that you come from an ancient people and that your history just began 400 years ago on these shores. You see? So are you thinking as an executive ruler? Are you thinking under the lines of a granted privilege? Because all other persons most likely think along those lines because they are property. But the value of property, that property has went down greatly, especially in the wake of this special pandemic. So many people have been let down. Their own lack of consciousness has betrayed them. So nevertheless, again, in order to be sovereign within the land, you have to be sovereign within the man. So nevertheless, coming from this special realm, because that's what your teaching does. It elevates your consciousness here. It opens up that seat of the intellect. This is the state, dealing with the ancient ones, as we spoke of, the Atlanteans, the Lemurians, those who were able to build a super civilization. This is because they know themselves. That's why the prophet tells us, know thyself and thy Father God Allah. Know your nationality and your divine creed. We'll put it that way. So, last but not least, we come to the crown now. You see? You come to the crown. The crown of your very consciousness and your being. We call this Act 7. Act 7. All citizens must promptly attend their meetings and become a part and parcel of all uplifting acts. You see the uplifting acts that we was talking about just then? You must become part and parcel of all of those uplifting acts that brought you to this level of consciousness that we just came to in this special measure, right? Uplifting acts of Moorish America. More God than you are man. The sovereign in the man. The sovereign of the land, right? Okay, Moorish America, right? The Moorish Americans must pay their dues, keep in line with all necessities of Moorish America, and then you're entitled to the name of faithful. Oh, man. Now, see, a lot of people going to just put this on the manifest because they want to fleece you. They want your money. They going to bust the lining out your pockets. You feel me? So when it comes to this aspect, they're going to tell you that dudes just focused on that aspect. Nothing wrong with supporting the prophet. That's all a part of his law as well. But the real dues that you owe to your prophet is taking everything that he brought to you and saving yourself. Remember, Act 4 dealing with this harder, man. Going all the way up in that ladder. You see, when you go all the way up into the highest realms of your consciousness, up above the sun, moon, and stars, as it has been stated by the prophet, around the almighty throne of Allah. When you get into that special area there, this is where you begin to pay your dues. Because when you become conscious of who you are, now you know how to give back. Now you become a philanthropist. Philanthropy or charity, or they like to call it zakat in the Orthodox Islamic world. This purifies the soul. So you keep what you give away. That's the grand draw in regards to dealing with that. Nevertheless, paying dues is pretty much picking up where the prophet left off. Paying dues is being about the business of your Father God Allah, doing the work. Paying dues is teaching your people to be themselves. Paying dues is demonstrating self-determination in order that you may create generational wealth for those who are coming behind you, the young and not yet born, the third and the fourth generation. And we know 3 and 4 is 7. That's that act, right? And then you are entitled to the name of who? Faithful. Right? So, husband, you must support your wife and children. Wife, you must obey your husband. Take care of your children. Look after the duties of your household. Man, this is deep in and of itself. All this right here go back again. When you speak of just alone, husband, support your wife and children, you have to be one that knows how to utilize your compass properly, so to speak. Your conduct has to be in line, with divinity in order for you to really have a path that will lead to the ability for you to provide for your family. And provision really start first with teaching your family how to be who They were born to be. And then you have the goddess who is symbolic, to the moon, receiving her light from the sun, the grandman, the husband, right? After he had planted those seeds of consciousness in the soil of her soul so she can teach the young seeds, support, right? She, in turn, being strong now, has the ability to obey, not because he demonstrates some type of guerrilla, force. You gonna do what I say. I'm gonna slap you down. No, nay. If you demonstrate like you supposed to be demonstrating, then in all actuality, love, knowing how to utilize your compass, brothers, will cause your goddess to move as she know she should move. And I'm gonna tell you like this already: a goddess and queen ain't finna move nowhere for NBC, a mere Negro. A goddess and queen ain't got nothing coming to a Negro, but leaving him where he stand. They call that divorce. And we don't even demonstrate along the lines of divorce here in the Moorish American government. There is no divorce because the great God Allah is the one that joined the souls. Man ain't the one that conduct the marriage. The marriage is conducted divinely. We call it a matrimonial hajj. That means the soul of the grand man and the woman has to be rooted in the principles in order for there to be some stability between the two. So again, this goes back to the thinking along the lines of citizenry. You see? Collective thoughts. You put her hand within your hand. The hand is symbolic to the mind, right? Understanding is the best part. That's what, we used to demonstrate when I used to rotate with my Nation and God and Earth family. The 5%ers. Yeah, so when you go a little further, right? We are told that sons and daughters must obey father and mother and be industrious and become part and parcel of the uplifting of fallen humanity. In order for that to happen, that means the God man and God woman have to have themselves in order. If not, the humanity within their consciousness will fall. And as a result of the fall of the humanity that was in their consciousness or should have been in their consciousness due to you too not doing what you supposed to do, then you already know what you got running around on the manifest. And then sometimes it can be a test for you because sometimes you can do all the right things and it's still meant to go as things are. But if the seeds and the principles are there, just like the prodigal son, then they too will return to their natural abode, being industrious. They too will become part and parcel of these uplifting acts. Right? And moreover, last but not least, all Moorish Americans must keep their hearts and minds pure with love and their bodies clean with water. This divine covenant is from your holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, through the guidance of his Father God Allah. That's the best part right there. Got to keep your heart and your mind, clean and pure. And we ain't got to talk about the body being clean with water. We already know what that cleansing rite has to do with. We dealing with the month of Ramadan right now. Our Orthodox community, I'm fasting right now. I'm not an Orthodox Muslim, I'm a Muslim. But I've been doing it, for over 25 years now. So, From that aspect right there, it's really just a part and parcel of my habit. I came into this way of life through Ramadan. Being my conscience, my first unfoldment, I fasted my way into Islamism. But the main aspect, purification of the heart and the mind, has to do with preparation. You're talking about a cleansing of the vessel. Because ain't no need in trying to place, anything that is of, we can say, that is nutritional in a dirty vessel. It even stated in the Pisceum, you can't put, new wine in old vessels, unless that is special demonstration verse. But when you go into this special aspect, it's really about the purity of heart, purity of mind, and, also, knowing that this is the divine covenant. This is a part of that holy covenant of the Asiatic nation, dealing with the care that continue in you all through your love to each other. It's for the family of Asiatics, Moorish kin. And we know that this was given to our holy prophet by the guidance and through the guidance of the great God Allah. Allah will say it, is his protector, his guide, his salvation by night and by day. I protect our guide and our salvation by night and by day through our holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali. See you returning back to salvation, our God and unity. You see? So, that being said, Moorish kin, I had a Moor ask me earlier in my timeline what it meant when the prophet had his hand over his heart. And common sense should all tell us that he was letting us know that we should keep our character constitutional based upon these 5 principles in love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. He was letting us know that our Moorish home is where our heart is. He was letting us know that purity of heart is key. And purity of the essence, have to do with consciousness in mind. So now that we have moved all the way up that rim coming from the scimitar sacrum through all these different degrees, guess what we ended up at in the ADEPT chamber? You see? Your chamber is above your neck. And we forged our scimitar of consciousness on the way. So consciousness represents the scimitar, and the 5 limbs represent you. Guess what that becomes? The Moorish American flag that came forth for all 60 million of our people. It's not the flag of the Moorish Science Temple. It's the flag of the Moorish American government. The government of all 60 million of our people. So that's an adept exegesis of our divine constitution and bylaws in a brief summary, a nutshell, so to speak. And we encourage our Moorish family, to be the message that you bring, be what you know, love your people. Because my goal is to teach my people. We're not here to teach hatred against any organization. We're not here to teach any hatred against our MSTA family. We're trying to get them to understand that you can't be free just remaining in the state of a lawfully chartered organization. And as I said all the time, our holy prophet established the MST of A. Just as you read about it in your history, Moorish kin, those of you in the temple, yes, he established that. But you keep forgetting one part. The one part y'all keep forgetting is the uniting of the Asiatic states. When I say that right there, I'm talking about government, self-government. He taught you to make you a citizen, basically better citizen of the government that you were under, but he was preparing a table for you in the very presence of your enemy, because he could utilize that law at the time so that we would be unmolested as a people under the protection of the amendment that entails to the freedom of what was dealing with religion at the time. But there would come a time, as the prophet said, after he had left the European here long enough to teach you how to run a government, that you unfold into government. And now, instead of just merely being a temple, that temple unfold into a consulate. You see? Instead of being a member in the organization, now you unfold into being a citizen with your own flag, your own seal, your own emblem, and your own constitution. Now you ask me, did the prophet bring that to the Moorish Americans in the Moorish American government? That's only a question that ADEPT can answer. So that being said, Moorish kin, we just say peace, love, and law to all of you, and honors to you. Whoever get a drawing from this measure, who if you got one from it now, all is well. And if you come in, I probably can't see it, or we'll get to it later, after we get off of here. No, but honors to all of you Moorish kin, and just accept your own, be yourself. And this measure is not just limited to the Moors, but this is also concerning, our family that demonstrate through the lineage of Marcus Most High Garviel, the divine harbinger of Prophet Noble Drew Ali, John the Baptist of this new era and time. And also it has to do with our family in the NOI. It has to do with those who came through their lineage, your 5%. It has to do with the nation of gods and earth. It has to do with those in the new Black Panther Party. It has to do with those, that in all of these various different walks of life, Hebrews, Moorish Hebrews, whatever you call yourself, New Wabians, even the ones that, that say that they have a great seal and so forth and so on. All of us must learn to govern ourselves under our divine constitution and bylaws. And that all have to do with knowing the self. So we say peace, love, and law. Keep it ma'adik. Shemo Tepu, Moorish kin, Uncle Ajet Sanel. Life, health, and prosperity be to you all. In love. Salute.